First of all, thanks for having me, guys. This is really great. I'm happy to be here. I'm going to have a talk with you later on for putting me behind the best speaker. It must be because I'm not from JNJ. Is that how it works? We leave that guy out in the cold? Yeah, so I'm not good at things too. One thing I'm not good at is public speaking, and it's really going to come to the fore now after seeing that. That was great. So, yeah, I'm going to talk to you guys today a little bit about work and capitalism. So, how many of you here are old enough to remember George Carlin? Oh, wow, more than I thought. So George Carlin had something to say about work once. He said, most people work just hard enough not to get fired and to get paid just enough money not to quit. And I saw another one interesting on a bumper sticker not too long ago. It said, capitalism makes us believe that the nastiest men with the nastiest intention really want to do something good for all of us. So, you know, most of the time satire is based in reality, right? So let's take a look at the reality. Every year the Gallup organization does a survey of employee engagement, and the numbers have been pretty steady over the last 12 to 15 years. 70% of employees in the United States are actively disengaged or disengaged. Means if they're disengaged, they just don't care, and if they're actively disengaged, they're actually trying to sabotage the company. On top of that, 22% of Americans don't trust big business. When you think about those numbers, they're pretty astoundingly low. I mean, they're not as low as Congress, but if that's all you can say is that we're a little bit better than Congress, that's pretty bad shape. Now, coupled with that, WebMD says that you're most likely to have a heart attack on Monday morning. So, we hate our jobs, right? We don't like our companies very much, and work is actually killing us. What's the problem? The problem really is capitalism doesn't work for all of us. And greed has replaced purpose and caring. That's what I think the problem is anyway. But what if there was a different way to do this? What if what kind of world could we create if companies, executives, investors cared as much about people as they do about profit? What kind of society do you think we could create? What type of communities could we create? That's what I want to talk to you a little bit about today. So a lot of you guys probably know what this is. Written by Robert Wood Johnson in, 1943, I believe it was. It's an amazing document. And it really speaks to something that we really care about operating your business for stakeholders, about how do you take care of customers, how do you take care of employees, how do you act in the community, and if you do those things, stockholders should receive a fair return. Now, you guys all know this. JNJ is one of the best at this. But whenever I say that line, stockholders should receive a fair return, I live in Manhattan, I live in the financial district, and I hear guys in my neighborhood going, fair? You don't mean that, right? Because the way that we practice capitalism today in most of the world, it's not about a fair return, is it? It's about maximum return. Yeah, we destroyed the planet, but for a long time we created some good shareholder value. This is what people think about capitalism today. So, I believe that capitalism is in crisis. That this focus that we've had for a long time now on shareholder value at the expense of everyone else has created things like the BP oil spill, collapsed factories in Bangladesh. We almost collapsed the whole financial system. But yet, most of us know that capitalism has also been one of the greatest powers for human improvement ever known. It's created all sorts of technological advances. It's given us clean water, food for people all over the world. It's lifted millions of people out of poverty, right? So the question I have is, how do we get back to that type of capitalism? How do we get to a capitalism that affords us the upside that we see in images like this, but keeps us a little bit away from the downside of the greed that we've been experiencing lately? And also, how did we get here? So let's talk a little bit about that. September 13, 1970. Anyone recognize that date? A guy by the name of Milton Friedman wrote an article in the New York Times on that day. The article was ostensibly about corporate social responsibility and why it was such a bad idea. And that day, Milton Friedman said something about capitalism. He said, the only responsibility a company has is to use its resources to generate profits, as long as it does so within the law. Most people believe that that statement, that article, issued in what the sort of era of shareholder value, what we've been living in for the last 30 years. And we've been caught between this battle between shareholders and everyone else since that day. Conscious capitalism, what I'm going to talk to you about today, believes something different. Some of you may have heard of the book of the same name, John Mackey and Raj Sisodia. I've worked with Raj for a long time, and I had the honor of giving some small insights for the book. And it's a movement that, what we're calling it is a movement, but it's really a different way to think about business. And what we believe is that the winners of the future are not going to be those companies that focus myopically on shareholders. They're going to be the companies that are based on purpose, that use culture, engagement, honesty, and transparency to generate value for all of their stakeholders. I'll tell you a little bit about my journey, how I got here. I got here pretty honestly. I'm an architect by training. I saw an architectural firm in 1986, right when I graduated from college. And for a number of reasons, that firm morphed into a broader-based management consulting company. We were doing all sorts of different stuff and trying to figure out how to create an environment, expanded the notion of environment, to inspire behavior within our client organizations. And we consistently found out, over 20 years of doing this sort of work, that our clients who were the most successful were not the ones who were focused on next quarter's earning, what's the bottom line going to be, shareholder value. Our clients that were the most successful were the ones who were asking questions about the nature of their relationships. How do we generate relationships and how do we make them better? These were people that were talking about how do we get our employees to get up in the morning and can't wait to come to the office, every day wanting to give us discretionary effort. How do we get our suppliers to feel like partners and not like servants, so that they're really engaged in our success as well? They're bringing us innovations every day. How do we get the communities that we want to work in, how do we get them to break down barriers to entry, to really want us in instead of putting those barriers to entry up, which create new types of friction in our business? And most importantly, how do we get our customers to feel like they're in a relationship, not in a transaction? They're in a real relationship, so that it transcends customer satisfaction and goes to something more like love. How do we do that? You've probably heard about this. There's many names for it, right? Conscious capitalism, sustainable capitalism. The Pope just wrote about virtuous capitalism in the New York Times not too long ago. Many names, the same secret. They use purpose, and they get their stakeholders to care about their success. Now, how do you actually do that? That's what we work on a lot. How do you actually do that? Well, you can't treat employees like they're just inputs for shareholders. You can't be you can't be an environmental Neanderthal. You have to understand that these are things you care about. And most importantly, if your customers think that you're exploiting them and you don't really care about them, really care about their well-being, you'll see how fast they'll tweet you into submission. Bank of America said, we're going to raise fees on our credit cards. And Twitter said, oh, no, you're not. Not while we're around. And they got the message, right? We heard you. At the end of the day, this is all about culture. You guys have probably heard this before. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. I'm a Drucker acolyte, and I really love Peter Drucker. I'm not sure he said this, but I love the quote. And it really talks about what we're talking about. Culture and purpose as an intangible asset for creating value. I don't know that Peter said that, but I do know about this guy, Herb Kelleher, Southwest Airlines. Now I want you to think about the airline business for a minute. Who in here loves to fly? Right. Everybody hates to fly. Everybody hates the airline business. You know, Warren Buffett says that airline business, not a chance, right? Investors hate the airline business. I think the airline guys hate the airline business, right? You can't make any money in it, except 30 straight years plus, now 30 years plus, of consistently creating value, consistent profitability. Southwest Airlines. Anyone in the airline business can do what they do. And Herb Keller said, look, our strategy is simple. You want to copy it? Anyone can copy it. The thing they can't copy is our culture. They can't copy that, and that's the only thing that makes us different. I talk to guys on the street all the time. They're like, yeah, what about the arbitrage they did on the fuel? I'm like, they've been making money for 30 years. That happened 8 years ago. It's not about that, and he knows it, just like JNJ knows it. This is really becoming a must-have corporate capability. I get people that ask me all the time, Jeff, do companies operate this way because they have a lot of money, or do they make a lot of money because they operate this way? In the past, it may have been that you had to grow into this, but now it's becoming a whole different story. And frankly, from a consulting and an investment standpoint, we know that this horse is out of the barn. Because if you don't believe your customers and your employees care about these issues and many more, and that they're more concerned with that than your profitability, and what's going to make them really care about your success is your ability to integrate these ideas into your business, well, you're looking at defections and destruction of long-term value. And the numbers back it up. This chart, the value of intangible assets, a percent of total market cap, 1975 to 2014. What this shows us is that if you believe like we believe, you believe what I've said today, that purpose and culture are really intangible assets that drive value, then this chart tells you just about everything you need to know. In 1975, in the energy business, we call this the gap, right? The gap is what's the difference between your book value and your market cap, your market value. In 1975, in the energy business, only 4% of your market value could be attributed to intangible assets. Today, it's 69%. It's not what you do, as Simon Sinek says, it's why you do it. That's what people care about. This here, Firms of Endearment, there's another book that was written by Raj, and actually this probably started me more down the path of conscious capitalism than anything. We worked with Raj for a long time, as I said earlier. And Raj came to us in 2004 and said, you know, I want to do a little study at my MBA class. He was at Bentley College in Massachusetts. He said, I want to understand why some companies develop real, deep emotional relationship with customers and others don't. What can we learn from that? How do they do it? The deeper Raj got into that research, he found out, well, it's not just customers. Employees feel the same way. Suppliers feel the same way. Communities welcome them in. And we were sitting around the table once reading over the manuscript for the book, and someone in our group said, hey, Raj, who's paying for all this love? Everybody loves these guys. Who pays for that? He said, well, we hadn't really thought about that. So he said, well, let's do some analysis for you. And this was the outcome of that analysis. That these companies that operate like JNJ, that operate like Southwest Airlines, create massive amounts of shareholder value. But they do it by thinking differently about the way the world works. They do it not by focusing so much just on the bottom line, but they do it by focusing on the things that really matter. I have a friend, Ed Freeman, who's a professor at UVA at the Darden School, and he says, you know, thinking that business is about profits is like thinking your life is about red blood cells. You can't live without red blood cells. But if I ask anyone you, is that what your life is about, creating red blood cells? No one's going to say yes. It's the same way with business. That you have to build this in to your DNA. But if you do, if you build these ideas into your DNA, you'll be able to create, this thing works. Hold on. Well, it didn't come up like I planned, but you'll be able to create real, strong, enduring, lasting, successful businesses. So, in the beginning of this, I asked you to think about what would the world be like if executives, entrepreneurs, investors cared as much about people as they do about profit. I believe capitalism has the power to create a more just, joyous, and sustainable society. One that we can all be proud of, one that lifts us all up, one that celebrates our humanity, one that looks at work as a calling to create something better in life, one that allows families to achieve their dreams, and one that makes us all prosperous. That, I believe, is a promise of conscious capitalism. Thank you very much.